how to manage people, how to manage all the communication skills, government, banking, numerology, worldwide. It doesn't matter what your language is. All world leaders belong to the Masonic Order, and they act together.
It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.
We're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex.
Dangerous chemicals over us from
Is the government experimenting with our weather?
That's the question at the heart of a phenomenon called chemtrails, now getting widespread attention.
Millions of tons of toxic poisons released by planes as part of the government plot to affect climate change.
The government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather, leaving what you see there, and they call that a chemtrail.
Geoengineering. They say it puts poison in the soil.
Tests show high levels of these chemicals in our rain and soil.
Using planes to spray chemicals into the atmosphere to manipulate or control rain.
And that's why health department records show a sharp increase in barium and aluminum in California's water supply.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
And that message calls for new frontiers, new vision. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
The Army's need to know more and more about weather that surrounds this planet is a vital part of the expanded research program of atomic weapons. We all talk about the weather. The Army is doing something about the weather.
I would like to take you into the laboratory and show you a few of the experiments that led us to our outdoor experiments in converting clouds into snow. Using our home freezing unit, such as this, we can form supercool clouds just like those in the natural atmosphere by taking a tiny piece of dry ice such as this and scratching it so a few tiny fragments fall into the supercool cloud. Long streaks develop. The particles grow very fast. They grow about 1 billion-fold in volume in a few seconds. Many millions of snow crystals form, and we get the same effect as is produced by dry ice. Dry ice is not particularly important as far as the fact that it's CO2. It is primarily important because it's colder than minus 35 degrees centigrade. This is a picture of the first cloud that we seeded back last November. Flying in a small Fairchild plane and putting dry ice from a small dispenser in the bottom of the plane, and within minutes saw long streamers of snow falling from the base of the cloud and evaporating into the drier air below. Under many conditions, of course, full-fledged snowstorms will be produced in this way. Nature at last has permitted to do a little something about the weather.
Using Schaefer-Langmuir techniques, the Army Signal Corps and Office of Naval Research began conducting many of these experiments.
In 1947, Project Cirrus expanded to test cloud seeding on a hurricane traveling eastbound 350 miles off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. They dropped 80 pounds of dry ice into the raging storm, only to realize that the hurricane suddenly changed direction and began traveling back towards the United States. Savannah, Georgia, was hit by record-breaking winds of up to 85 miles per hour. More than 1,500 people were left homeless, and at least 2 people died. The total damage was reported in the millions of dollars, and the project and its participants were blamed for what happened.
On the night of the 15th of August 1952, the worst flood in British history swept through the tiny seaside village of Lynmouth. 90 million tons of water devastated the area, killing 35 people and leaving over 400 homeless. 40,000 tons of boulders were dragged off the moors, destroying houses and cars. Porters spoke to squadron leader Len Otley. He confirmed that he worked on Project or Operation Cumulus, which was also referred to as Operation Witch Doctor. What's more, in mid-August 1952, Alan Yates, a lecturer at Cranfield School of Aeronautics at the time, was asked to take part in cloud seeding experiments. According to Yates, the artificial rain fell over Lynmouth and washed the village into the sea. Newly declassified documents prove that Project Cumulus was indeed going on the day of the flood that year.
Project Skyfire, a U.S. forestry research operation concerned with the study of lightning in all of its manifestations.
Project Skyfire is aimed at lightning fires in western Florida. In detail, the manner in which your work involves you in the dispersion of clouds, which happen to have some effect on, or rather bring about thunderstorms or what have you. Could you tell our audience something about that type of work?
Laurie, we're conducting experiments in cloud seeding aimed at determining whether or not weather modification techniques might possibly prevent lightning fires. We carry this work on by seeding clouds with silver iodide nuclei. We disperse silver iodide from specially developed generators located either on the ground or on aircraft. Our experience has been that we can do the best job through aircraft seeding.
Military planners imagined loading the clouds with radiological, biological, or chemical agents and having them rain on demand.
They could attack your enemy using the weather, but deny ever doing so. Allegations were made that cloud seeding had not only made jungle paths impossible, it had also killed thousands of innocent people. But this didn't stop governments from continuing to explore ways of modifying the weather, sometimes for highly questionable purposes.
July 1976. Strange, unexplained blackouts in worldwide communications plague the globe and are covertly transmitting extremely low-frequency waves, otherwise known as ELF waves.
It's called the Russian woodpecker because it was essentially that sort of clicking, pecking sound.
In 1982, a report by Pentagon researcher L. Ponte alleges the Russian woodpecker signal is actually creating layers of artificial ionization in the upper atmosphere, which means it could have been bending the jet stream and altering global wind patterns.
There's been a lot of research in military labs over what you can do with putting radio waves into the atmosphere. Some of the research indicates that one can move the jet stream around and thus induce weather conditions.
It's no coincidence that the United States began building its own mysterious array of antennas.
HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, originally a joint effort of the Air Force and Navy in cooperation with a number of academic institutions.
Of 180 antennas, approximately 72 feet tall, linked together to function as one giant steerable antenna. Steerable because it can aim millions of watts of ELF waves into one tiny patch of the atmosphere. HAARP is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe. Working in tandem, these transmitters alter the weather anywhere in the world, potentially changing the jet stream's course entirely. The intense energy being beamed into the sky by HAARP sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere. The waves get reflected back down and pass through the Earth and ocean. But HAARP's startling potential doesn't end there. It's linked to a strange phenomena occurring in our skies.
The exhaust from jet engines, usually seen as long, thin trails of white clouds behind high-flying jet airplanes, may be a big reason why there are 30 fewer days of sunshine a year in the Midwest now than there were in 1900. The daily range between high and low temperatures has also narrowed.
In the absence of natural clouds, given the correct atmospheric conditions, jet aircraft in high frequency can almost completely cover the atmosphere with clouds.
And finally, a federal report today predicted possible catastrophic warming of the Earth by the 1990s with the strong climate change.
Hurricane Gloria is moving on the East Coast tonight like a monster out of a science fiction film.
3,000 homes went underwater, and of those, almost 900 were destroyed.
From 1987 through 1992, California experienced the most severe drought in the state's history. According to NOAA, an anomaly occurs in the jet stream. The winds appear to change direction, blowing east to west instead of west to east, indicating the jet stream coming into the west is suddenly much weaker than normal, causing a drought. By 1995, the jet stream returns to normal.
Here there were huge problems with flooding, intersections and parking lots underwater, homes threatened,
people trapped in the river that you see out here behind me, forcing those dramatic rescues.
This U.S. Air Force report graphically outlines the military's desire to exploit and manipulate the weather for the purposes of war by the year 2025. According to one of the most harrowing lines in this report, quote, "Weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of war-fighting environments."
For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal.
Geoengineering, chemtrails, forced vaccinations, population control, weather modification, war games. We have not given consent. You cannot spray the atmosphere with toxic chemicals and expect no ramifications. These chemicals go into our food, our air, and our water supply. Ill effects of these have been recorded as headaches, flus, breathing problems, skin problems, and my major concern is Alzheimer's disease. Aluminium causes nerve damage. Fluoride in the water works with aluminium in the air to cross into our brains. At this moment, about 24,700 young people around the age of 30 and above have Alzheimer's. In the next 10 years, 400,000 people in Australia will have dementia. It is now the third leading cause of death in Australia. About 10 years ago, I did a degree in environmental management. It's concerning to me that in that short time, we were brainwashed to believe in population control, that our Earth could not sustain itself if we didn't intervene. The Earth has enough resources for everyone. We need to change our thinking, but also change our actions. If you have never heard of these terms before, then please start looking at the sky and make your own decisions. It's not like they can hide the spraying.
Now, Monsanto have recently bought a bee research company called Beeologics in 2012, and they have genetically modified a bee that can only pollinate Monsanto crops, and also this bee is resistant to all pesticides.
Man-made global warming is no longer just a theory about climate. It is the defining moral and political cause of our age. It is presented in the media as having the stamp of authority of an impressive international organization.
From the IPCC,
the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
I've often heard it said that there is a consensus of thousands of scientists on the global warming issue and that humans are causing a catastrophic change to the climate system. Well, I am one scientist, and there are many that simply think that is not true.
The final conclusions are politically driven.
This claim that the IPCC is the world's top 1,500 or 2,500 scientists, you look at the bibliographies of the people and it's simply not true. There are quite a number of non-scientists.
And to build the number up to 2,500, they have to start taking reviewers and government people and so on, anyone who ever came close to them. And none of them are asked to agree. Many of them disagree.
Those people who are specialists but don't agree with the polemic and resign, there have been a number that I know of. They are simply put on the author list and become part of this 2,500 of the world's top scientists.
People have decided you have to convince other people that since no scientist disagrees, you shouldn't disagree either.
Climate scientists need there to be a problem in order to get funding.
We have a vested interest in creating panic, because then money will flow to climate science.
It's become a great industry in itself. And if the whole global warming farrago collapsed, there'd be an awful lot of people out of jobs and looking for work.
There's one thing you shouldn't say, and that is, this might not be a problem.
It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.
Hello and welcome to Outsiders Weather and the Skeptics Ice Age Watch, where, as reported by Electroverse and the Moscow Times, Western Russia has been hit by bitter cold this week and has joined central and eastern regions, which have been battered by brutal Arctic lows of minus 58.3 degrees Celsius and beyond for months now. Moscow is suffering its coldest weather of the past decade, with one weary Muscovite tweeting, "Moscow was almost minus 20 degrees Celsius today. So cold the water in my drink bottle froze." In Paris, there was so much ice on the Eiffel Tower that they had to use a blowtorch to get rid of it because ice-controlled salt is too corrosive for the metal. In Germany, according to Ice Age Now, they shivered through the coldest weather since the beginning of the 21st century. In Saxony's capital, Dresden, the temperature dropped to minus 16 degrees Celsius. In Berlin, to minus 10 degrees Celsius, and in northern Bavaria, there were 10 degrees of frost. As one astute but shivering German showed on social media. The temperature dropped to minus 27 this morning. My solar panels can't keep anything warm. Thank God for natural gas and coal when we need it. And here's global warming enthusiast Germany's Chancellor, Angela Merkel, wondering whether history will view as her greatest legacy her decision to throw open her borders to an avalanche of single adult male Middle Eastern asylum seekers, or her decision to get rid of coal. Tough choice, Angela. Speaking of avalanches, according to AccuWeather, there have been a record 16 avalanches across the United States in the last fortnight in what they describe as the deadliest avalanche season in over a century.
That's going forward.
Avalanche control has been a top priority across the country, especially this week. 8 skiers were caught in an avalanche just outside of Salt Lake City Saturday. 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women in their 20s, did not make it. The area was under very high-risk avalanche conditions, with the Utah Avalanche Center tweeting this morning. Authorities say all 8 skiers were experienced and had the right equipment, but sometimes the right equipment isn't enough.
Meanwhile, in New Jersey, the lovies who elected Joe Biden are trying to figure out why it's so damn cold and whether or not it hasn't been this cold since 1978. Maybe, was their hesitant conclusion. That's the problem, you see, with believing in a theory like global warming at a time of record cold weather throughout the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern. As I say, when the facts don't fit the theory, it might be time to dump the theory. There are ice chunks coming in from the sea, and Britain is now experiencing what it has experienced many times in the past, namely a little ice age. Meanwhile, the climate alarmists in Britain were forced last week, possibly because of the little ice age, I imagine it was because of it, because of the freezing weather, they decided they better whip up a bit of climate alarmism, with the UK Telegraph terrifying its readers that a tick-borne disease, a parasite with malaria-like symptoms known as babesiosis, is marching across the land because of global warming. This nightmare scenario they had drawn from a report that warned the UK is at risk of the spread of infectious diseases like dengue fever, Lyme disease and West Nile fever, and from an increase in cholera infections from warming waters in Europe. Whoa! The vectors of these diseases are mosquitoes, sandflies and ticks. As I said, it's freezing cold in Britain at the time, and how many cases of this terrifying babesiosis had they found in the UK last summer to spark off this terrifying alert? 1. Yes, just 1.